Most people attend Thanksgiving for the turkey and awkward small talk, but my sister treated the dinner table like a boardroom. She stood up and turned a pregnancy announcement into an invoice. Demanding I buy her a 4-bedroom house in front of 20 witnesses, she thought she had trapped me with public pressure, but she did not know I had brought my own surprise. I was not there to cut the turkey. I was there to cut her off. My name is Eloise Clark. I am 33 years old, and I kill excitement for a living. That is not the official job title printed on my business card. Of course, the card says Contract Manager at Bracken and Vale Compliance Group, a firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, that specializes in corporate risk assessment. My job is to read the fine print that other people ignore. I am the person who points out that the force majeure clause does not cover your specific type of disaster. I am the person who highlights the penalties in red ink. I am the person who says no when everyone else is desperate to say yes, because I can see the cliff edge that they are sprinting toward. You would think that a skill set like this, the ability to detach, analyze, and predict worst-case scenarios, would be something I leave at the office door when I clock out at 5 o'clock. But when your family is the Whitman clan, you do not get to clock out. You simply switch from corporate liability to domestic liability. This year, Thanksgiving was being held at the family home in Cedar Hollow, a sprawling suburb where the lawns are manicured to within an inch of their lives and the mailboxes are all painted the same shade of aggressive beige. We always called it the family home, or Mom and Dad's house, but every time I pulled my sedan into the driveway, it did not feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a bear trap painted to look like a welcome mat. The engine of my car ticked as it cooled down in the driveway. I sat there for a full 2 minutes, staring at the front door. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was pulled back in a severe, tight bun, not a single strand out of place. My blouse was a crisp, unyielding white. I looked like I was about to fire someone, which, in a spiritual sense, was exactly what I was prepared to do. In my blazer pocket, resting against my ribs, was a thick manila envelope. It had a weight to it, a gravitational pull that grounded me. It was my shield. It was my weapon. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of cold Carolina air and impending doom, and stepped out of the car. Inside, the house smelled of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and deception. The air was thick and humid, heated by the oven and the collective breath of too many people packed into a dining room that was never designed for this capacity. It was not just our immediate family. It never was. My sister, Blair, needed an audience. A performance is nothing without applause, and Blair Whitman lived for the encore. There were neighbors I barely recognized, a couple from the church choir, and a few of Blair's friends from high school who never seemed to leave town. They were the extras in the movie of her life, and I was just the producer who funded the production. I made my way through the crowded living room, nodding politely at people who mispronounced my name. I found my spot at the long dining table. The seating arrangement was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive engineering. At the head of the table sat my father, Frank, looking tired and pliable, like a piece of worn-out leather furniture. To his right was my mother, Diane, buzzing with a frantic, nervous energy, her eyes darting around the room to ensure everyone was witnessing the perfection of her hospitality. And then there was Blair. My younger sister sat at the other end of the table, opposite Dad, in the seat of honor usually reserved for the matriarch. She was glowing. That is the only word for it. She wore a dress that was perhaps a bit too expensive for a casual family dinner, something shimmering and gold that caught the light of the chandelier. Her fiancé, Gavin Price, sat next to her. He was a nice enough man, handsome in a bland, catalog model sort of way, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He looked like he was just happy to be included, completely unaware that he was swimming in shark-infested waters. I was seated near the foot of the table, squeezed between a radiator and a woman named Mrs. Higgins who smelled strongly of peppermint and judgment. My name card was handwritten in Blair's looping calligraphy, but she had spelled it Eloize, a small error, a careless mistake, or perhaps a subtle reminder that I was not important enough to be spelled correctly. Dinner began with the usual rituals. Dad mumbled a grace that went on for 3 minutes. Mom praised the turkey as if she had hunted it herself in the wild. Platters were passed, wine was poured. The conversation was a low hum of gossip and sports scores. I ate mechanically. The turkey was dry. The cranberry sauce came from a can. I could still see the ridges of the tin molded into the jelly. I cut my food into precise, 1-inch squares and waited. I knew the rhythm of these dinners. There is always a turn. There is always a moment when the casual chatter stops and the agenda begins. In my family, we do not have conversations. We have negotiations disguised as anecdotes. It happened just as the pumpkin pie was being brought out. Blair pushed her chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh screeching sound that silenced the room more effectively than a gavel. She stood up. She picked up her glass of sparkling cider. She had made a point of not drinking wine all night, a theatrical gesture that everyone had politely pretended not to notice, and tapped it with a spoon. Clink, clink, clink. "Excuse me, everyone," Blair said. Her voice was breathless, high-pitched, the voice of a beauty queen accepting a crown. "If I could just have a moment of your time, I have some news, some really big news." The room went dead silent. 20 pairs of eyes locked onto her. Mom clasped her hands under her chin, her eyes already welling up with tears that looked suspiciously rehearsed. Dad set his fork down and nodded. A slow, rhythmic motion, as if he were listening to a song he had heard 1,000 times before. Blair looked down at Gavin, who beamed up at her, and then she swept her gaze across the room, letting it linger on me for just a fraction of a second too long. "Gavin and I went to the doctor yesterday," she began, letting the suspense hang in the air like smoke. "And we found out that our family is going to get a little bit bigger. Well, actually, a lot bigger." She placed a hand on her flat stomach. "I am pregnant," she announced. Then she paused for effect, her smile widening. "With triplets." The room exploded. It was instantaneous pandemonium. Mrs. Higgins gasped so hard, I thought she might inhale her napkin. Mom let out a sob of pure ecstasy and started clapping her hands above her head. 3! Oh my goodness! 3 babies! Frank, did you hear? 3! "I heard." "Diane, I heard," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion, though whether it was joy or resignation was hard to tell. People were standing up, reaching across the table to shake Gavin's hand, offering toasts, shouting questions. Triplets. Can you imagine? 3 little blessings. I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap. I watched Blair. She was basking in it, soaking up the adoration like a lizard on a hot rock. But I saw her eyes. They were not soft with maternal wonder. They were sharp. They were calculating. She was scanning the room, measuring the reaction, ensuring she had maximum leverage before she made her move. Because there is always a move. In the Whitman family, good news is never free. Blair raised her hand. Silencing the crowd, she laughed. A tinkering, musical sound. "Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We are so overwhelmed, truly. But..." Her face turned serious, the mask of the concerned mother slipping into place. "We are also being realistic. Triplets, 3 babies, plus Gavin and me, that is 5 people." She turned her head slowly, swiveling like a turret until she was looking directly at me. "Our apartment is tiny," Blair said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic register. "There is just no way we can fit 3 cribs in a 1-bedroom apartment. It is impossible. We need space. We need safety. We need a real home." The room was quiet now, waiting for the solution. The crowd sensed that the script was moving to the next act. "But we are so lucky," Blair continued, her eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity, "because we have family who takes care of us. Right, Eloise?" I did not blink. I felt the envelope against my ribs. "Congratulations, Blair," I said. My voice was even, devoid of inflection. that is quite a development." "It is," she agreed. "And Mom and Dad and I have been talking. We realize that with 3 babies coming, we need stability. So," Blair's face lit up. It was like watching a light bulb surge with too much voltage. She clasped her hands together. "You did?" "Oh, Eloise. See? I told you. Mom, she is always 5 steps ahead. Where is it? Is it the one on Maple Street? The brick one with the columns?" Mom beamed. "Oh, Eloise, that is wonderful. That was so fast." "It is a beautiful house," I said. 4 bedrooms, a sunroom, a library. It is in a gated community about 20 minutes from here. Very private, very secure. "Perfect," Blair squealed. She looked at Gavin. "Honey, she already found it. 4 bedrooms." She turned back to me, reaching out as if to hug me. "When can we move in? Do we need to sign papers?" I looked her dead in the eye. I let the silence stretch for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. "You are misunderstanding me." "Blair," I said. Her smile faltered. "Just a fraction." "What?" "I found a house," I repeated, enunciating every syllable. "For me?" The smile vanished. It did not fade. It was deleted. Her face went slack. "What?" "I signed the closing papers yesterday morning," I said. "I am moving out of my apartment. I am moving into my new house. Alone." The room went so quiet that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "But," Blair laughed, a nervous, stuttering sound. "But what about us? What about the triplets? You just said it has 4 bedrooms." "You do not need 4 bedrooms. You are single." "I have a lot of books," I said, "and I like space." "Eloise," Mom said, her voice sharpening, losing its sugary coating. "Stop joking. Your sister is having 3 babies. She needs a home. You cannot just buy a mansion for yourself and leave her on the street." "She has an apartment," I said. "And she has a fiancé." I nodded at Gavin. "I assume the father of the children intends to provide for them?" Gavin looked like he wanted to dissolve into the upholstery. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "This is selfish," Blair snapped. The mask was fully off now. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You are being incredibly selfish. We are family. You have the money. You know we do not. How can you sit there and talk about your library when I'm carrying 3 lives inside me?" "You are right," I said. "We need to talk about resources and allocation." I reached into my blazer pocket. I felt the texture of the manila envelope. I pulled it out. It was thick, packed with documents. I placed it on the table, right next to the rejected keys. It landed with a heavy slap that made the silverware rattle. "What is that?" Dad asked, frowning. "This," I said, resting my hand on the envelope, "is the reason I cannot buy you a house, Blair." "Is it a budget?" Blair scoffed. "We can make it work. I promise I will not ask for expensive furniture right away." "No," I said. I looked around the table, meeting the eyes of the stunned guests. Then I looked back at my sister. "This is a record, a complete record." "Of what?" Blair demanded. I leaned forward. The air in the room felt electric, charged with the storm I was about to unleash. "And this house," I said, gesturing vaguely to the walls around us, the walls of the Cedar Hollow home where we were currently sitting, "is not something you have the right to upgrade." Blair froze. Mom stopped breathing. I kept my hand on the envelope. "Because you cannot trade up from a property that you do not own. And you certainly cannot demand a new mansion when the rent on this one has not been paid in gratitude, but in cash, my cash." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. It was like someone had cut the music at a wedding right before the bride walked down the aisle. The guests looked down at their plates. Mrs. Higgins stopped chewing. Blair looked at the envelope, then at me. For the first time in her life. She did not look like the main character. She looked like the defendant. I tapped the envelope with my index finger. "Shall we discuss the terms?" I asked. The origins of the manila envelope sitting on the Thanksgiving table did not begin with a pregnancy announcement. It began 24 months ago, in a sterile hospital waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. My father, Frank, had suffered what the doctors called a mild cardiac event. It was not a massive heart attack, but it was enough of a scare to shake the foundation of the Whitman family. For a normal family, a health crisis brings people together emotionally. For my family, it was a catalyst for a financial restructuring. I remember sitting in the plastic chair, watching the monitor beep, when my mother, Diane, turned to me. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling. "We have to make changes." "Eloise," she whispered, gripping my hand with a strength that surprised me. "Your father cannot handle the stairs in the old rental, and the landlord is raising the rent again. We are drowning. We need stability." At that moment, I felt the familiar tug of duty. I was the daughter who fixed things. I was the one who managed the contracts at Bracken and Vale. Surely, I could manage this. Blair was there too, pacing the room, checking her phone. She was going through a breakup at the time. Or perhaps a career change, with Blair. The two were often synonymous. She looked at Mom and said, "We need a place where we can all be together. I can help take care of Dad. I need to get settled anyway." And just like that, the idea was born. A family home, a multi-generational sanctuary where we could care for our aging father and support each other. It sounded warm. It sounded noble. It sounded like the kind of thing a good daughter would facilitate. I did not realize then that they were not describing a home. They were describing a cage. The search for the house happened with blinding speed. Blair, who had no job and no savings, appointed herself the head scout. She found the house in Cedar Hollow within a week. It was a sprawling two-story colonial with white siding and black shutters. It had curb appeal. It had a wraparound porch. It had a price tag that made my stomach turn over. $450,000. I sat at the kitchen table in my parents' cramped rental, staring at the listing sheet. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this is at the very top of my budget, and that is assuming I put down 20%. That is $90,000 in cash." "I know. Honey, I know," Mom said, pouring me a cup of tea. "But look at the space. Dad can have the room on the first floor. Blair can take the upstairs suite. It is perfect, and we will all chip in." "We will?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "Dad has his pension. I have my Social Security coming in soon. Blair is starting that new online business. We will pay the mortgage. We just need you to initiate it." Then came the hook, the legal hook. Mom looked down at her hands. "You know our credit took a hit when Dad got sick last year. If we try to apply for a mortgage now, the interest rate will be astronomical. They might not even approve us." She looked up at me, tears swimming in her eyes. "But you, Eloise, you have that pristine credit score. You have the steady income. If you buy it, we get the best rate. And then, in a year or two, when we are back on our feet, we can refinance and put our names on it too. It is just temporary, just a formality to get Dad into a safe house." Frank, sitting in his armchair with a blanket over his knees, looked at me with pale, watery eyes. "Help your old man. El, just this once. I just want to rest." I looked at them. I saw my vulnerable father. I saw my desperate mother. And I saw Blair, nodding eagerly, promising that she would cover the utilities, that she would be the best caregiver in the world. I signed. I sat in a lawyer's office downtown, surrounded by mahogany furniture, and I signed my name 30 times. I wrote a check for $92,000 to cover the down payment and the closing costs. I watched my savings account, which I had built over 10 years of 60-hour work weeks, drain away in a single afternoon. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, looked at me over his spectacles. "You understand that as the sole borrower, you are 100% liable for this debt?" he asked. "I understand." I said, "It is for my family." He nodded, but he did not smile. He had seen this before. The move-in day was a celebration for everyone but me. I was the one carrying the boxes. I was the one coordinating the movers. Blair walked around the empty rooms with her phone out, recording videos for her social media. "New chapter," she chirped into the camera. "So blessed to have this space. Family, first new home." She did not mention who paid for the space. She did not tag the bank. Within a month, the dynamic shifted. The house was legally mine, but territorially, it belonged to Blair. She claimed the largest bedroom upstairs, the one with the ensuite bath. She turned the sunroom into her content studio, filling it with ring lights and tripods. She filled the kitchen with her specific brand of organic protein powders and aggressively labeled jars. I had kept a room for myself, the smallest one at the end of the hall, but every time I came home, I felt like a guest who had overstayed their welcome. "Oh, Eloise," Blair would say when I walked into the kitchen after a 10-hour shift. "You are home? Listen, I have the girls coming over for a wine night. Do you mind staying in your room? We need the kitchen for a video." My kitchen. The kitchen where I paid the mortgage, the insurance, and the property tax. I started to feel suffocated. The house was always loud. Blair's friends were always there, drinking my coffee, using my bandwidth, parking in my spot in the driveway. Mom and Dad retreated to their quarters, happy to let Blair run the show as long as she kept the energy high and the drama low. I became the ghost in my own property. I was the silent partner. The bank. 6 months in, the financial promises began to evaporate. "Mom," I said one evening, holding the mortgage statement, "the payment is $3,200 this month. You said you would transfer $1,500. "Oh, honey," Mom said, looking frazzled. "The pharmacy bill was insane this week, and the car needed new tires. Can you cover it just this once? We will double up next month." They never doubled up. Next month it was a heating repair. The month after that, it was groceries. The month after that, Blair needed to invest in a new camera to grow her business so she could pay me back later. I was paying almost $4,000 a month to support a house I barely lived in. The suffocation became so intense that I did something illogical. I moved out. I could not stand the noise, the disrespect, the way Blair looked at me like I was an intruder when I walked through the front door. So, I rented a tiny 400-square-foot studio apartment in a quiet complex called Brookmere Row. It cost me another $1,200 a month. My friends thought I was insane. "You are paying a mortgage on a mansion and rent on a shoebox?" they asked. "I am paying for peace," I told them. But I was not paying for peace. I was paying for their lifestyle. I was enabling the very dynamic that Aunt Judith had warned me about. Everything was justified with the family mantra. "We are family. Eloise, we help each other. It is an investment. Eventually, the house will belong to all of us." But the house did not feel like an investment. It felt like a noose. The turning point, the moment the domestic thriller turned into a detective story, happened on a Tuesday afternoon 3 months ago. I had stopped by the house to pick up some winter coats I had left in the closet. It was midday. Everyone should have been out. Blair usually slept until noon, and Mom took Dad to physical therapy on Tuesdays. I let myself in. The house was quiet for once. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. On the counter, there was a stack of mail. Usually, Mom was vigilant about the mail. She intercepted it the moment the carrier arrived, sorting it into piles and whisking it away. She said she wanted to save me the trouble. She said she was being helpful, but today, she must have forgotten. I idly flipped through the stack. Junk mail, coupon flyer, a magazine for Blair, and then I saw it. It was an envelope from a bank, not the bank where I held the mortgage, a different bank, a lender known for high-risk personal loans. The envelope was addressed to me, Eloise Clark. I frowned. I did not have an account with this bank. I had never applied for anything with them. I reached for the letter opener. Just as the metal blade touched the paper, I heard a gasp. I turned around. Blair was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. She was wearing her silk robe, her hair messy from sleep. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the envelope in my hand. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, breathless. "I am opening my mail." I said, "What is this, Blair?" She lunged. It was not a graceful movement. It was a desperate, feral scramble. She snatched the envelope from my hand before I could slice it open. "Give me that!" she hissed. "Blair!" I stepped back, shocked. "That is addressed to me." "It is junk mail," she shouted, clutching the envelope to her chest. "It is just spam. Credit card offers. They send them to everyone. I was going to throw it out for you." Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. "You do not snatch junk mail with that kind of panic. You do not look like you have just been caught holding a smoking gun over a credit card offer." "Let me see it," I said, holding out my hand. "If it is junk, let me see it." "No." She backed away, her eyes darting to the back door. "You are so paranoid. Eloise, it is nothing. Just leave it. Why are you even here? I thought you were at work. Mom is going to handle it," she added, throwing out the ultimate shield. She told me to collect the mail. "Stop being so controlling." She turned and ran out of the room, clutching the envelope like it was a gold bar. I heard her footsteps thudding up the stairs. Then the slam of her bedroom door. Then the click of the lock. I stood in the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence of the house rushed back in. But now it felt different. It felt heavy. It felt malicious. I looked around the room. I looked at the granite countertops I had paid for. I looked at the stainless steel refrigerator I had bought. I looked at the walls that sheltered my family. And suddenly, the picture reassembled itself. Why was Mom always so eager to get the mail? Why did they never want me to see the utility bills, claiming they had already handled them? Why did Blair react with terror over a letter addressed to me? They were not just living off me. They were using me. My name was not just on the deed. My name was a resource they were mining. I did not chase Blair up the stairs. I did not bang on her door. That is what the old Eloise would have done. Demanded an explanation, cried, and then accepted whatever lie they spun. Instead, I walked out of the house. I got into my car. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the front door. Aunt Judith's voice echoed in my head. "Do not fight them. Document them." I drove straight to the credit bureau. I drove to the county clerk's office. I went back to my small apartment, opened my laptop, and I started to dig. That afternoon, the house stopped being a home. It became a crime scene. And I was the detective who had just realized that the calls were coming from inside the house. The house was indeed a trap. But they had forgotten one thing about traps. If you understand the mechanism, you can release the spring. And if you are careful, very careful, you can ensure that when it snaps, you are not the one standing in the kill zone. I did not sleep that night. I watched the cursor on my screen blink, revealing line after line of data that turned my blood to ice. The Thanksgiving dinner was 2 months away. I had time. I would let them play house for a little longer. I would let Blair film her videos. I would let Mom hide the mail. I would wait, and I would prepare the envelope that would end it all. The transformation from daughter to auditor did not happen with a bang. It happened in the quiet. Blue glow of my laptop screen between the hours of midnight and 4 in the morning. For 3 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, my small studio apartment in Brookmere Row ceased to be a home. It became a war room. I bought a whiteboard. I bought highlighters in 4 different colors. I printed out every single bank statement from the last 24 months, not just for the mortgage account, but for my personal checking account, my credit cards, and the joint emergency fund I had foolishly established with my mother. I treated my own life like a hostile corporate takeover. The first step was the forensic reconstruction of the cash flow. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by piles of paper, tracing the invisible hemorrhage of my finances. I found the obvious drains immediately. The mortgage payments I had covered when my parents were short, the utility bills that had mysteriously spiked during the months Blair was filming her Winter Cozy content series. But then I found the subtle thefts, the ones that hurt more because they were intimate. There were charges on the joint emergency card for medical supplies that, upon cross-referencing with merchant codes, turned out to be from a high-end beauty supply distributor. There were withdrawals of cash, $200 here, $300 there, dated on days when I knew Blair was going out of town. My mother had access to that card. She had sworn it was only for the pharmacy and the doctors. I did not call them. I did not scream. I simply highlighted the line item in yellow. Yellow meant fraud. After the financial audit came the legal fortification. I needed to know exactly where I stood. I knew I had signed the papers, but in the fog of family guilt, memory can be unreliable. I needed absolute certainty. I called Aunt Judith. We met at a diner halfway between Cedar Hollow and the city. She did not hug me. She simply slid a file across the Formica table and ordered black coffee. I pulled the deeds from the county registry, Judith said, her voice low and raspy. I also pulled the mortgage note and the title insurance policy. I opened the file. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. What does it look like? I asked. It looks, Judith said, taking a sip of coffee, like the most ironclad sole proprietorship I have seen in a decade. She pointed a manicured finger at the document. Look at the grantee line. Eloise Clark. No et al. No rights of survivorship with Frank or Diane. Just you. Look at the mortgage. Sole borrower. You are the only person the bank knows exists. But they live there, I said. They have established residency. They are tenants at will, Judith corrected me. And since there is no written lease agreement, and they have not paid you a consistent, documented rent that matches fair market value, they have very few rights. In North Carolina, the law is clear. You own the dirt, you own the bricks, you own the air inside the hallway. She looked me in the eye. The trap they set for you, Eloise, the one where they made you sign everything because their credit was too bad, that was their fatal error. In their greed to secure the house using your credit score, they accidentally gave you total control. They thought they could control you emotionally, so they did not worry about controlling you legally. I ran my finger over my name on the deed. It was true. By forcing me to carry the burden, they had handed me the sword. What about eviction? I asked. 30 days, Judith said. Since there is no lease, you owe them a 30-day notice to quit. That is it. You do not need a reason. You do not need to prove they damaged the property, though I am sure they have. You just have to serve them notice. 30 days, I repeated. It has to be done correctly, Judith warned. Written notice, delivered in a way that can be proven. If you mess up the procedure, they can drag it out for months. But if you do it right, they are gone. I nodded. I will do it right. Step 2 was the disconnect. I went home and initiated what I called the exit script. It had to be silent. If they sensed I was pulling away, they would panic and guilt-trip me back into submission before I was ready to strike. I logged into the bank portal. I changed the password to a 40-character string of nonsense that not even a supercomputer could guess. I removed my mother's email address from the notification alerts. I turned off paperless billing for the joint account and had the physical statements rerouted to a warm P.O. box. I had opened in the next town over. I contacted the utility companies. I put a password on the account so that no one, specifically not a sister pretending to be me, could call and extend a payment deadline. Then, I made the call that terrified me the most. I called a real estate agent. Her name was Sarah, and she was known as the Shark of Cedar Hollow Real Estate. I met her at the house on a Wednesday morning when I knew the family would be at a church function. I need a valuation, I told her as we stood in the foyer. Strictly confidential. If you see a woman named Blair or a couple named Frank and Diane, you are here to inspect the HVAC system for insurance purposes. Sarah walked through the house. She noted the hardwood floors. She noted the custom crown molding that Blair had demanded we install last year. She noted the sheer size of the lot. She came back to the kitchen, tapping on her tablet. The market in Cedar Hollow has gone crazy in the last 18 months, Sarah said. Everyone wants to move to the suburbs. Inventory is at 0. Give me a number, I said. If you list this today, Sarah said, looking up. With the way the market is trending, you could list at $620,000, and you would probably get a bidding war. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had bought the house for $450,000. I owed about $420,000 on the principal. If I sold it for $620,000 after closing costs and agent fees, I would walk away with nearly $150,000 in cash. The house was not a burden anymore. It was a winning lottery ticket. My parents and sister were squatting on a gold mine, assuming I was too stupid or too loyal to cash it in. They were living in my retirement fund. They were treating my financial freedom as their playroom. "Get the paperwork ready," I told Sarah. "Do not list it yet, but have the listing agreement ready for me to sign." "When?" she asked. "Soon," I said. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place 3 nights before Thanksgiving. I was doing a deep dive into Blair's digital footprint. I had created a burner account on social media. No profile picture, generic name, so I could view her stories without her knowing I was watching. Blair was active. She posted 10, 20 times a day, videos of her outfit, videos of her morning routine in my kitchen. I clicked on a link in her bio. It was a link to a fundraising platform. The title of the campaign made me stop breathing for a moment. "Help the Whitman family build their dream nursery." I clicked on it. There was a photo of Blair and Gavin, looking lovingly at a sonogram picture. Below it was a long, tear-jerking story about how they were struggling young parents who had been blessed with triplets and needed help to renovate their family home to make space for the babies. "We have the house," the text read, "but we need funds to build an addition for the nursery and upgrade the safety features. Every dollar helps us build a safe haven for our miracles." I scrolled down. They had raised $8,400. I looked at the donor list. There were names I recognized, people from our old church, friends of my parents, even a few of my distant cousins. Renovate the family home. Build an addition. She was raising money to renovate a house she did not own. She was soliciting donations for construction on a property where she was essentially a guest. And where was that $8,000? It certainly was not in the house fund jar in the kitchen. It had not been used to pay the mortgage. It had not been used to fix the leaking gutter I had been nagging them about for months. I cross-referenced the dates of the large donations with Blair's social media posts. A $500 donation came in on October 3rd. On October 5th, Blair posted a photo of a new designer handbag. A $1,000 donation from the church group came in on November 1st. On November 2nd, Blair and Gavin checked into a luxury spa hotel for a baby moon weekend. It was fraud, pure and simple. She was stealing from her friends, using my property as the bait. My first instinct was to screenshot it and text it to the family group chat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive over there and throw the phone in her face, but I stopped myself. If I confronted her now, she would spin it. She would say the money was set aside. She would say I was jealous of her support system. She would cry. Mom would take her side. "She is pregnant. Eloise. Hormones make you do crazy things. Do not be so harsh." They would gaslight me until I doubted my own eyes. No, I could not fire a warning shot. I needed a kill shot. I needed to wait for the moment when she felt the safest, when she felt the most triumphant. I needed to wait until she was standing on her pedestal, convinced she was the queen of the world, so that when I pulled the rug out, the fall would be absolute. I looked at the calendar. November 24th, Thanksgiving. It was Blair's favorite holiday. She loved it because it was the one day of the year where she could guarantee an audience. She loved the toasts. She loved the center of attention. It was perfect. I spent the next 2 days drafting the documents. I did not use a template. I used the specific language Aunt Judith had given me. Notice to quit. Notice of intent to sell. Cease and desist regarding the unauthorized solicitation of funds for the property located at 124 Oak Creek Lane. I printed them on heavy, cream-colored bond paper. They looked official. They looked final. I put them in a thick manila envelope. I did not seal it. I wanted to be able to slide the photos of the fundraising fraud in at the last minute if I needed them. I pulled my sedan up to the curb of the house on Oak Creek Lane at exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had timed my arrival with the precision of a military strike. Arriving too early meant being roped into the frantic, performative preparations in the kitchen. where I would be scolded for chopping the celery wrong. Arriving late would give them ammunition to paint me as the distant, uncaring sister who could not be bothered to show up on time for family. So, I aimed for the neutral zone, 3 o'clock, the time when the appetizers were out, the wine was breathing, and the trap was fully set. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the white bakery box. Inside was a pumpkin cheesecake I had purchased from a grocery store 3 miles away. It still had the price sticker on the bottom, $12.99. In years past, I would have stayed up until 2 in the morning baking something from scratch. A towering confection of caramelized sugar and organic spices, trying to prove my domestic worth. Not this year. I was done auditioning for a role I was never going to get. A store-bought cake was adequate. It was edible, it was polite, and most importantly, it was emotionally detached. I stepped out of the car and buttoned my blazer. The air was crisp, smelling of burning leaves and wood smoke. I looked up at the house, my house. The white siding gleamed in the afternoon sun, innocent and welcoming. But as I looked closer, I saw the cracks in the facade. The gutter on the left side was sagging, choked with dead leaves, because Frank had not hired anyone to clean it, and Blair certainly would not break a fingernail doing manual labor. The front lawn was a patchwork of overgrown weeds and bald spots. It looked like a property that was being consumed, not maintained. But it was the driveway that made me pause. I had expected the usual lineup: Mom's sedan, Dad's truck, and Blair's flashy leased convertible. But the street looked like the parking lot of a mid-sized concert venue. There were at least 15 cars lining the curb, stretching down to the neighbor's mailbox. I recognized the bumper stickers on a few of them. There was the faded minivan belonging to the youth pastor at the community church. There was the bright red sports car owned by one of Blair's influencer friends, a girl who always screamed when she spoke. There were cars I did not recognize at all. This was not a family dinner. This was a summit. I tightened my grip on the cake box and walked up the path. The noise hit me before I even opened the door. A wall of chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glass filtered through the wood. I took a deep breath, patted the inside pocket of my blazer to ensure the manila envelope was still there, and turned the knob. The foyer was packed. Coats were piled high on the banister like the pelt of some slain beast. I navigated through the crowd, nodding at faces that looked vaguely familiar. People smiled at me, but their smiles were tight, curious. They looked at me the way one looks at a contestant on a game show who does not yet know they are about to be eliminated. "Eloise, you made it!" My mother, Diane, materialized from the kitchen. She was wearing a velvet dress that was slightly too tight, her face flushed with the manic energy of a woman trying to coordinate a 3-ring circus. She did not hug me. She gestured wildly to the room. "Look at this turnout," she exclaimed, her voice pitched high enough to shatter crystal. "Everyone wanted to come. Everyone loves Blair so much. We just could not say no." "It is a full house," I said, handing her the cake box. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." She took the box without looking at it and passed it to a passing teenager I did not know. "Oh, wonderful. Go put this in the back. Sweetie, Eloise, come. You have to say hello to Gavin's parents, and the deacon is here." She dragged me into the living room. Blair was holding court by the fireplace. She sat in the oversized armchair, my armchair, the one I had bought with my first bonus check, looking like a queen on her throne. She wore a shimmering gold dress that draped loosely over her stomach. Gavin, her fiancé, stood behind her, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. When Blair saw me, her eyes lit up, not with affection, but with the sharp, predatory gleam of a hunter spotting the deer. "Eloise," she squealed, extending a hand but not rising. "Finally! We were waiting for you to get here so we could start the real fun." "Traffic was light," I lied. "Hello, Blair. Hello, Gavin." Gavin smiled, a wide, gleaming expression that showed off expensive dental work. "Hey, Eloise. Good to see you. Great house. By the way, every time I come here, I just think, wow, great bones. It has good structure, I said neutrally. If you maintain the foundation, Gavin nodded eagerly, missing the subtext entirely. He was a man who skated on the surface of life, unaware of the currents beneath. He had no idea he was standing in a foreclosure waiting to happen. He thought he was marrying into a dynasty. "Dinner is in 10 minutes, Mom announced, clapping her hands. "Everyone, find your seats. We have name cards." I made my way to the dining room. They had extended the table by pushing 2 folding tables against the main mahogany one, covering the mismatch with a long linen tablecloth. It was a seating arrangement for 24 people. I scanned the table for my name. At the head of the table, facing the window, were 2 seats decorated with ribbons, Blair and Gavin, the guests of honor. To their right and left sat Mom and Dad, and Gavin's parents. Then came the inner circle, the deacon, the wealthy friends, the people Blair needed to impress. I walked further down the line, past the cousins, past the neighbors, past the high school friends. I found my seat at the very end of the extension table, wedged against the swinging door to the kitchen. I was sitting next to the radiator, which hissed menacingly, and across from a toddler in a high chair who was already covered in sweet potato puree. I looked at the place card. It was written in Blair's elaborate, swirling calligraphy. Eloise. I stared at the Z. It was not a mistake. Blair had won spelling bees in the 4th grade. She knew how to spell my name. The Z was a message. It said, "You are a stranger here. You are a caricature. You are not important enough to be accurate." I pulled out my folding chair. Metal. Cold. Unlike the padded chairs at the main table, and sat down. From my vantage point, I could see the entire length of the table. It was a perfect display of hierarchy. The power was concentrated at the top, basking in the light of the chandelier. I was in the shadows, literally and metaphorically. Dad was sitting 3 seats down from Mom. He looked exhausted. His skin had a grayish pallor, and he kept rubbing his left arm. He caught my eye for a brief second. He did not smile. He looked away, focusing intently on his bread roll. He knew what was coming. He was complicit, but he was too tired to enjoy the execution. Aunt Judith was seated in the middle zone, a buffer between the VIPs and the peasantry. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked like armor. She caught my eye. She did not wave. She simply picked up her phone. A moment later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Eat, observe, do not react. Let them build the gallows." I slid the phone back into my pocket. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap. The dinner began with a prayer led by the deacon, who thanked the Lord for bountiful blessings and expanding families. When he said expanding families, half the table turned to beam at Blair. She looked down modestly, biting her lip, playing the role of the Blessed Madonna to perfection. As the bowls of mashed potatoes and green beans began to circulate, the conversation turned into a carefully orchestrated press conference. "So, Blair," one of the influencers chirped, leaning forward, "you have been hinting at big news all week on your story. Is today the day?" Blair laughed, a tinkering sound. "Oh, maybe. We are just so thankful for everything right now. But honestly, we are feeling a little cramped, aren't we, Gavin?" Gavin nodded while chewing a piece of turkey. "Yeah, the apartment is getting tight, especially with, future plans." "We walked past a house on the way here," Mom interjected loudly, ensuring the entire table could hear. "A lovely place, but not as nice as this one. Nothing compares to a family home, right?" "Space is so important for children," a woman from the church group noted sagely. "They need a yard. They need fresh air. You cannot raise a family in a concrete box." "Exactly," Blair exclaimed. She looked down the long table, her eyes finding me in the distance. "That is what I keep telling Eloise. This house has such a huge yard. It is a shame it is just sitting there, barely used. The swing set is rusting." "Eloise is busy with her career," Mom said, her tone dripping with a mixture of pride and pity. "She works so much. She hardly has time to enjoy the grass. Which is why it makes sense to rethink how we use our resources, Blair said. She picked up her glass of sparkling cider. I mean, family helps family. That is the rule. The table murmured in agreement. Family helps family. Of course. Amen. I cut a piece of turkey. It was dry. I chewed it slowly, swallowing the sawdust texture. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me. They had been prepped. They knew the narrative. I was the career-obsessed spinster sister hoarding the family wealth. Blair was the radiant, fertile future who deserved the resources. They were not here to eat dinner. They were here to be the jury in a trial where the verdict had already been decided. They thought they were pressuring me. They thought that by surrounding me with 20 witnesses, by putting me in the cheap seat, by misspelling my name, they could shame me into submission. They thought that when the demand came, I would crumble because no one wants to look like a villain in front of the deacon. Diane leaned over to Gavin's mother. I have already picked out the curtains for the nursery, she whispered loudly. Yellow, neutral, since we do not know the genders yet. Oh, Diane, you are so prepared, Gavin's mother gushed. It is like it is already a done deal. It is, Diane said, casting a quick, nervous glance at me. We just have to finalize the logistics. Logistics. That was their word for extortion. I felt the heat of the radiator against my leg. The room was getting warmer, the air thick with the smell of gravy and expectation. Blair was glowing brighter and brighter, feeding off the energy of the room. She looked powerful. She looked invincible. She had no idea that the logistics were currently sitting in the inside pocket of my blazer. Weighing less than 4 ounces, I reached up and adjusted my collar. My fingers grazed the edge of the manila envelope. The paper was cool and smooth. I took a sip of water. I watched Blair whisper something to Gavin, who nodded enthusiastically. He wiped his mouth with his napkin. Blair adjusted her dress. She cleared her throat. The murmur of the room began to die down. The guests sensed the shift. The prelude was over. The main event was about to start. I did not look away. I did not shrink in my metal chair. I sat up straighter. I looked directly at my sister, down the long corridor of white linen and polished silver. Go ahead. I thought, make your move. Climb up on that pedestal. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. I was not here to argue. I was not here to defend myself against their accusations of selfishness. I was not here to beg for their approval. I was here to close the file. Blair pushed her chair back. The legs scraped against the floor. A screeching sound that signaled the beginning of the end. I placed my fork down on the plate. Softly, I was ready. The moment arrived with the sharp, crystalline sound of silver striking crystal. Clink, clink, clink. Blair stood up. She did not just rise from her chair. She ascended. It was a movement practiced in front of a mirror, designed to catch the light of the chandelier and the attention of every living soul in the room. She held her glass of sparkling cider high, her other hand resting gently, protectively, on her stomach, around the table. The reaction was Pavlovian, as if on a silent command. 20 smartphones were raised in unison. The room was suddenly illuminated by the glow of recording screens. The guests knew the drill. This was content. This was a moment. If they did not capture it, did it even happen? I watched the red recording dots blink like tiny, unblinking eyes. Blair smiled at the lenses, rotating slightly to ensure her good side was captured by the influencers across the table. Family, Blair began, her voice trembling with a carefully curated emotion. Friends, thank you for being here. You know, this year has been a journey. Gavin and I have been praying for a sign. We have been praying for a miracle. She paused. She looked down at Gavin, who was staring up at her with a mixture of adoration and mild terror. He looked like a man who had boarded a roller coaster and just realized the safety bar was loose. Well, Blair whispered, leaning into the silence she had created. God answered. She took a deep breath, her chest rising dramatically. We are pregnant, she announced. A collective gasp rippled through the room, but Blair held up a hand. She was not done. The crescendo was still coming. But we are not just having a baby, she said, her voice rising to a triumphant shout. We are having triplets. The explosion was immediate and deafening. It was not just applause, it was hysteria. My mother, Diane, let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She threw her napkin onto the table and covered her face with her hands, shaking uncontrollably. 3, she wailed. Oh, Frank, 3 of them. Can you believe it? My father, Frank, stood up slowly. He looked stunned, his eyes wide. He walked around the table and pulled Blair into a hug, burying his face in her hair. Gavin was immediately swarmed by his parents. His back slapped so hard I thought he might choke. The room was a chaos of congratulations. A triple blessing, the deacon shouted. Incredible, screamed the influencer friend. The noise was overwhelming, a wall of joyful sound that vibrated against the windows. I sat perfectly still in my metal folding chair. I did not clap. I did not gasp. I simply watched the performance. Triplets. The math of it was staggering. Not just biologically, but financially. 3 cribs, 3 car seats, 3 college tuitions. And based on the way Blair was looking at me over Dad's shoulder, she had already calculated exactly who was going to foot the bill. The hugging subsided. The room quieted down, waiting for the encore. Blair wiped a tear from her cheek, a tear that had managed not to ruin her mascara, and turned to face me. The crowd parted. It was like the Red Sea splitting, creating a direct visual line between the golden child at the head of the table and the financier at the foot. But you know, Blair said, her voice shifting, the tearful fragility vanished, replaced by a sugary, steel-reinforced command. With 3 babies coming, things are going to have to change. Our little apartment just won't cut it, and neither will this place. She swept her hand around the room, dismissing the very house we were sitting in, the house I paid for, as insufficient. We need space, she said. We need a sanctuary. She walked toward me. The cameras followed her. I was now a supporting character in her live stream. And that is why we are so lucky to have Eloise, she said, beaming at me. My big sister, the successful one, the one who always takes care of us. She stopped right in front of me. The smell of her vanilla perfume was cloying. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a heavy ring of keys. They were the keys to her current apartment, but in this moment, they were a prop. They represented the transition. Eloise, she said, her voice ringing out clearly for the cameras. You are going to help us, aren't you? You are going to buy us the bigger house. It was not a question. It was a script direction. My mother clasped her hands together, nodding vigorously. Yes. Oh, it is the only way. Eloise, imagine. 3 nurseries. We need 4 bedrooms. Blair listed off, ticking the requirements on her fingers as she loomed over me. A fenced yard, a finished basement for a playroom, and it has to be close to Mom. We found a few listings in Cedar Hollow that are perfect. She grabbed my hand. Her skin was warm and damp. She pressed the keys into my palm and curled my fingers over them. We start looking this week, she declared. I am free Tuesday. We can sign papers by the end of the month. The room erupted in applause again. They were clapping for my generosity. They were clapping for the solution. They looked at me with benevolent smiles, thinking what a wonderful sister I was. How noble it was for me to sacrifice my resources for the sake of these 3 unborn miracles. Diane was beaming at me, her face wet with tears. My good girl, she mouthed. My good girl. I looked down at the keys in my hand. They felt heavy, like a piece of lead. I looked at the cameras recording me. I looked at Gavin, who was avoiding my gaze, staring intently at the centerpiece. I took a slow breath. I opened my hand. I picked up the keys with 2 fingers, as if I were holding a dead insect, and I set them down on the white tablecloth. Clank. The sound was small, but in the break between applause, it was audible. Congratulations, Blair, I said. My voice was low, calm, devoid of the hysterical pitch that filled the room. "Triplets, that is truly a lot to manage." "It is," Blair laughed, oblivious to the temperature drop in my immediate vicinity. "That is why we need to move fast. The market is crazy. But I know you can handle it. You always find the best deals." "You are right," I said. "I do find good deals." I pushed my chair back. The metal legs scraped against the wood. I stood up. I was not as tall as Blair in her heels, but I stood straight. "In fact," I continued, "I have already found a house." Blair's eyes widened. She turned to the crowd, triumphant. "See? I told you. She is always 5 steps ahead. She already found one." Diane let out a squeal of delight. "Oh, Eloise, where is it? Is it the one on Willow Creek? The brick one?" "It is a beautiful property," I said, my voice steady. 4 bedrooms, a library, a sunroom, a very secure, gated community. "Perfect!" Blair shouted, clutching Gavin's arm. "Oh my God, a library! The kids can study there. When do we move? When do we get the keys?" The guests were smiling. The narrative was complete. The hero had delivered. I looked Blair dead in the eye. I waited. I let the silence stretch for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I wanted to make sure every single camera caught exactly what I was about to say. "You are confused, Blair," I said. Her smile faltered. "What?" "I found a house," I repeated, enunciating every single word with surgical precision. "For me," the smile froze. It did not disappear instantly. It just stuck there, a glitching graphic on a screen. I don't understand," Blair stammered. "I signed the papers yesterday," I said. "I am moving tomorrow." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was sudden and violent, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the space by a vacuum. The clapping stopped. The whispers died. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Diane's face went slack. "What?" she whispered. "Moving? Moving where?" "Away," I said. "To my new house. Alone." "But—" Blair looked around the room, her eyes darting frantically, looking for an explanation that fit her script. "But what about us? What about the triplets? You just said it has 4 bedrooms. We need 4 bedrooms." "I have a lot of books," I said, "and I value my privacy." "Privacy?" Diane's voice sharpened, rising into a shriek. "Eloise Clark, what are you talking about? Your sister is pregnant. She is carrying 3 babies. You cannot just leave. You cannot just buy a mansion for yourself and leave her on the street." "She is not on the street," I said calmly. "She has an apartment. She has a lease." "It is too small," Blair screamed. The mask of the sweet, glowing mother finally cracked, revealing the spoiled, terrified child underneath. "It is a 1-bedroom. How can we fit 3 babies in a 1-bedroom? You are being selfish. You are being disgusting." "Am I?" I asked. "Yes," she hissed, stepping closer to me. "You have the money. You have the credit. You know we don't. We are family. How can you stand there and talk about a library when I'm trying to build a future?" "We need to talk about futures," I said. "And we need to talk about the past." I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. I felt the cool, smooth surface of the manila envelope. I pulled it out. It was thick. It was substantial. I placed it on the table. It landed right next to the rejected keys. "What is that?" Frank asked, his voice hoarse. He had turned pale, clutching the back of his chair. "This," I said, "is the truth." "Is it a check?" Blair asked, hope flickering in her eyes for a brief, delusional second. "Is it a trust fund?" "No," I said. I looked past Blair. I looked past my mother, who was now clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. I looked past Gavin, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floorboards. I looked at Aunt Judith. She was sitting perfectly still, her hands folded on the table. She met my gaze. Her eyes were hard, gray flint. She gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. "Aunt Judith," I said. My voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. "You are a lawyer. You understand paperwork better than anyone here." I pushed the envelope across the tablecloth toward her. It slid smoothly over the linen. Stopping right in front of her plate. "Would you mind reading this for the family?" I asked. "I want to make sure there is no ambiguity. I want to make sure everyone understands the terms." Blair looked at Judith, then at the envelope. A flicker of genuine fear crossed her face. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that this was not a game she controlled. Judith stood up. She did not rush. She pushed her chair back with dignity. She smoothed the front of her charcoal suit. She reached out and picked up the envelope. She did not hold it like a letter. She held it like a weapon. She held it like a judge holds a gavel before delivering a death sentence. "I would be happy to," Judith said. Her voice was dry and raspy, cutting through the tension like a serrated knife. She undid the clasp of the envelope. She reached inside and pulled out the stack of documents. The paper rustled loudly in the silence. "Let us see what we have here," Judith said. She put on her reading glasses. Diane made a whimpering sound. "Judith, whatever this is, don't ruin Thanksgiving. Not now. Not with the babies coming." "The babies are not the only things arriving today." "Diane," Judith said, not looking up from the papers. "Reality has arrived, too." She cleared her throat. She looked at the first document. "This," Judith announced, holding up a sheet of paper with a gold seal at the bottom, "is a certified copy of the deed of trust for the property located at 124 Oak Creek Lane, the house we are currently standing in." She paused. She looked at Blair. "Blair, who do you believe owns this house?" Judith asked. "Mom and Dad," Blair said, her voice shaking. "It is the family house. Everyone knows that." "Incorrect," Judith said. She turned the paper around so the room could see. "The owner of record," Judith read, her voice booming, "is Eloise Clark, sole owner, 100% interest." The room gasped again. This time, it was not a happy gasp. It was the sound of a narrative shattering. "And this," Judith continued, pulling out the next sheet, "is a record of all mortgage payments made over the last 24 months. She scanned the columns. Payment from Frank Whitman, 0. Payment from Diane Whitman, 0. Payment from Blair Whitman, 0. She looked up over her glasses. Payment from Eloise Clark, 100%. "That is a lie," Diane screamed. "We bought the groceries. We paid the bills." "We will get to the bills," Judith said calmly, pulling out another sheet. "But first, we need to discuss the status of the residence." She pulled out a document that had "Notice to Quit," printed in bold, black letters at the top. "Eloise," Judith said, turning to me, "do you wish for me to serve this now?" "Yes," I said. Judith turned to my parents. She turned to Blair. "This is a formal 30-day notice to vacate the premises." Judith said, "The property has been listed for sale. The listing agreement is signed. The house goes on the market on Monday." "You are selling the house?" Blair whispered. She looked like she had been slapped. But where will we go?" "That," I said, speaking for the first time since Judith stood up, "is a question for the people who actually have income." The phone cameras were still recording, but the influencers were not smiling anymore. They were capturing the raw, ugly footage of an empire collapsing. "Judith," I said, "please continue. I believe there is a section about the house fund." Blair's face went white, translucent white. She reached out as if to grab the papers from Judith's hand. "No!" Blair shrieked. "Stop! You cannot read that. That is private." "It was public enough when you posted the link on Facebook," Judith said, pulling out a spreadsheet highlighted in yellow. The room was frozen. The air was so tight it felt like it would snap. I looked at my sister, the light of the family, the golden child, and I watched the light go out. Aunt Judith did not shout. She did not use the theatrical cadence of a preacher or the aggressive volume of a prosecutor. She simply put on her reading glasses, adjusting them on the bridge of her nose, and began to read with the flat, devastating monotony of a person reciting a grocery list. "Deed of Trust," Judith read, her voice cutting through the thick, humid silence of the dining room. "Recorded in the Mecklenburg County Registry of Deeds, book number 452, page 118, she flipped the page. The sound of the crisp paper turning was the only noise in the world. Property description: 124 Oak Creek Lane, Cedar Hollow, North Carolina. A single-family residence situated on 0.7 acres of land. She looked up over the rim of her glasses, scanning the faces of the guests who were still holding their phones, though some had lowered them slightly, sensing that the genre of the movie had shifted from romance to horror. "Grantee," Judith continued. "That is the legal term for the owner, the person who holds the title, the person who possesses the right to sell, lease, or destroy the property." She paused. She looked directly at Blair. Eloise Clark. The name hung in the air. It did not land softly. It landed like a brick. "Not Frank Whitman," Judith said, clarifying the negative space. "Not Diane Whitman, and certainly not Blair Whitman. My mother, Diane, made a sound like a deflating balloon. The color drained from her face so rapidly that her heavy contour makeup stood out in stark, orange streaks against her pale skin. She looked at Frank. My father was staring intently at his hands, which were clenched into fists on the tablecloth. He looked like a man who was praying for a sinkhole to open up beneath his chair. Blair let out a laugh. It was a sharp, brittle sound, like glass breaking. "Oh my God, this is ridiculous," Blair said, looking around at her friends, trying to rally her troops. "You guys, stop being so dramatic. It is just a technicality. Everyone knows it is Mom and Dad's house. Eloise just put her name on it for tax reasons. Right, Daddy?" She reached out and shook Frank's arm. "Daddy, tell them it is your house." Frank did not look up. He did not speak. He just breathed, heavy, labored breaths that rattled in his chest. "Daddy!" Blair's voice rose to a shriek. "He cannot tell them that, Blair," Judith said calmly, turning another page, "because that would be perjury, and unlike this family, the law does not operate on feelings. It operates on facts." Judith pulled out the next document. It was a spreadsheet I had compiled, detailed down to the cent. "Let us discuss the financial structure of this family home," Judith said, "because there seems to be a misunderstanding about who paid for the roof over your head." She ran her finger down the column. "Initial down payment," she read, $92,450, paid via cashier's check from the personal savings account of Eloise Clark. A murmur went through the room. $92,000. That was not a small favor. That was a life savings. "Closing costs," Judith continued, $7,800, paid by Eloise Clark. She flipped the page. "Monthly mortgage payments, $3,120 per month for 24 consecutive months. Total principal and interest paid to date, $74,880. She looked at the spreadsheet. "Contributions from Blair Whitman," Judith read. "0." She looked at Diane. "Contributions from Diane and Frank Whitman towards the principal." She read, "0." Judith took off her glasses and set them on the table. "So," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "To summarize, Eloise has poured nearly $170,000 of her own post-tax income into this building, and in exchange, you have given her a seat by the kitchen door and a name card that is spelled wrong. Gavin Price, the fiancé, the father of the triplets." Slowly turned his head. He looked at Blair. For the last 2 years, he had looked at her with the blind adoration of a puppy. He had looked at her as a prize. Now, he was looking at her the way one looks at a stranger who has just walked into your house uninvited. "Blair," Gavin said. His voice was confused, thick. You told me your parents owned this place outright. You said the mortgage was paid off in the 90s. It is, Blair insisted, her eyes darting frantically. They are lying. Eloise she is manipulating the numbers. She is an accountant. Gavin, she knows how to fake this stuff. I am a contract manager, I corrected her from my end of the table. And I do not fake anything. Those are bank-certified records. Gavin, you are welcome to call the branch manager. His name is Mr. Henderson. I can give you his direct line. Gavin looked at the papers on the table. He looked at the impressive, official seals. Then he looked at Blair's terrified face. The math was doing itself in his head. You told me we could live here rent-free because it was legacy property, Gavin whispered. You said we just had to pay utilities. We can, Blair shouted. Gavin, baby, don't listen to her. She is just jealous. She is jealous because I am pregnant and she is alone. She is trying to ruin our moment. She turned to me, her face twisting into a mask of righteous victimhood. She placed both hands on her stomach, effectively framing the unborn triplets as a shield. How can you do this? She demanded, tears finally spilling over, hot and angry. I am pregnant, Eloise. I am carrying 3 babies. My blood pressure is already high. And you are doing this? You are attacking me in front of everyone? You are trying to kick a pregnant woman out on the street? The room wavered. The pregnant woman defense was a strong one. I saw the deacon shift uncomfortably. I saw a few of the neighbors exchange sympathetic glances. It is a powerful taboo to evict a mother-to-be. Blair knew this. She was banking on it. She was counting on my shame to override my logic. I did not blink. I did not look at her stomach. I looked at her eyes. Do not change the subject, I said. My voice was not loud, but it had the absolute, cold clarity of a judge banging a gavel. This is not about your pregnancy, I said. This is about theft. This is about 2 years of financial abuse, and you do not get to use those children as human shields to protect yourself from the consequences of your own greed. I am not stealing, Blair screamed. It is family money. It is all the same pot. It is not the same pot, I said. It is my pot, and the lid is closed. I reached for the second envelope, the thinner one I had kept in my pocket. I placed it on the table. And just so we are clear, I said, addressing the room at large. This is not a negotiation. I am not asking you to leave. Blair, I am telling you that the legal status of this property has already changed. Diane looked up, her eyes wild. What do you mean? What has changed? The house is sold, I said. It was a lie. Technically, the house was not closed yet, but the listing agreement was signed, and I had a cash offer from an investor that I had accepted verbally 3 hours ago. In the world of the Whitmans, if I said it was done, it was done. What? Diane whispered. I signed the listing agreement on Tuesday, I said. And because the market in Cedar Hollow is so aggressive, I accepted a cash offer this morning. The buyers are a lovely couple. They want a quick close. They want possession in 30 days. You sold it? Frank spoke. His voice was a croak. Without telling us? I own it, I said. I do not need to tell you anything. But how? Diane stammered. I would have known. I would have seen the signs. I would have seen the letters. You mean the letters from the bank? I asked. The privacy notices? The valuation reports? I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes, who had also taught me that my privacy was a suggestion and her curiosity was a mandate. I know you check the mail. Mom, I said. I know you sort it every day at 11 in the morning. I know you hide anything that looks official because you are terrified that if Dad sees a bill, he will have another heart attack, and you are terrified that if I see a bill, I will ask questions. Diane's mouth opened and closed. She looked like a fish pulled onto a dock. She could not deny it. Everyone in the room knew she was the gatekeeper of the mailbox. I switched all my correspondence to a post office box 6 weeks ago, I said. That is why you did not know. You were waiting to intercept a warning that I never sent to this address. 30 days, Blair whispered. She was shaking her head, her hands trembling over her stomach. You cannot do that. We have nowhere to go. We have the babies coming. We have the nursery. The nursery fund. She stopped. She clamped her mouth shut. But it was too late. The words were out. The nursery fund. Gavin's head snapped up. What fund? The room went quiet again, but this was a different kind of quiet. This was the quiet of a scandal breaking. Nothing, Blair said quickly. Too quickly. Just money we were saving, from our paychecks. You don't have a paycheck, Blair, I said. And Gavin just said he thought he was living rent-free. I looked at the guests. I looked at the lady from the church choir. I looked at the wealthy cousin. Actually, I said, I think some people in this room might know about the fund. The Help the Whitman Family Build Their Dream Nursery Fund? The one hosted on that donation platform? The lady from the church choir gasped. She put her hand to her throat. Blair, she said, her voice trembling. You told me that money was to build an addition on the house. You said you had the permits, but you needed cash for the lumber. I do, Blair stammered. I mean, we were going to, once Eloise signed the house over. Signed the house over? I asked. I never agreed to sign anything over, so you were raising money to build an addition on a house you did not own, based on a promise I never made? And the money? Gavin asked. He stood up. His face was red. Blair, my buddies at work. They chipped in. $500. Where is that money? Is it in the bank? Blair looked trapped. She looked at the door. She looked at Mom. It is safe, she said weakly. I used a little bit of it for essentials. Essentials? I asked. Like the baby moon at the Ritz-Carlton last weekend? The murmuring in the room turned into a buzz. The influencers were whispering to each other. The phones were still recording, but now they were capturing the destruction of a reputation. Blair looked at me with pure hatred. If eyes could kill, I would have been incinerated in my metal chair. You are enjoying this, she hissed. You are a monster. You planned this. You came here today just to destroy me. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I did not plan to destroy you, Blair, I said. I planned to save myself. I looked at the table. I looked at the cold turkey, the congealing gravy, the store-bought cheesecake that no one would eat. This is not revenge, I said, looking her dead in the eye. Revenge would be suing you for the rent you never paid. Revenge would be reporting the misuse of charitable funds to the platform administrators, which, by the way, is a federal offense. I paused. This, I said, gesturing to the papers on the table, the deed, the notice to quit, the evidence of my ownership and their deceit. This is a boundary. You have spent your whole life thinking that love means no boundaries. You thought that because we are family, you could take whatever you wanted and I would just print more money. I turned to walk away, but I stopped and looked back one last time. But the bank is closed, Blair, I said, and boundaries have paperwork. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Gavin's voice rise in a shout, demanding to see his bank app. I heard Diane sobbing. I heard the sound of the perfect Thanksgiving dinner dissolving into the chaos of accountability. I did not look back. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool, crisp air. It smelled of freedom. The morning after Thanksgiving did not bring a hangover from wine, but it brought the unique, vibrating headache of a phone that refused to die. I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning in my townhouse at Brookmere Row. It was a small space, barely 1,200 square feet, sandwiched between a retired librarian and a young couple who traveled 5 days a week. It did not have a wraparound porch. It did not have a sunroom. It did not have a sprawling lawn that required a landscaping crew. What it had was silence. I lay in bed for 10 minutes, listening to the sound of absolutely nothing. No one was clanging pots in the kitchen. No one was screaming about a lost hairbrush. No one was asking me where the checkbook was. The air conditioner hummed a low, steady note of independence. I rolled over and looked at my phone on the nightstand. The screen was lit up with a terrifying list of notifications. 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, 12 voicemails. The breakdown was predictable. Diane had called 20 times. Her texts were a chaotic stream of consciousness ranging from guilt to panic. How could you do this to us? Followed by Dad is not feeling well. Please call back, followed by, we can fix this. Just come over for breakfast. Frank had sent 3 texts, all identical. We need to talk. Call me. It was the digital equivalent of him sitting in his armchair, waiting for me to come to him. And then there was Blair. I sat up and swung my legs over the side of the bed. I did not call them back. Instead, I pressed play on the first voicemail from my sister. It had been recorded at 11 o'clock the previous night. You are a bitch. Eloise. Her voice was slurred, thick with rage and likely a few glasses of the wine she was not supposed to be drinking if she was pregnant with triplets. You think you are so smart with your little papers? You humiliated me. In front of the deacon. You are going to pay for this. I am going to sue you for emotional distress. Delete. I played the next one. Recorded at 1 o'clock in the morning. L? The rage was gone, replaced by a weepy, trembling tone that I knew well. It was her scared little girl voice, the one she used to get out of speeding tickets. L, please pick up. Gavin is freaking out. He is asking all these questions. You have to tell him you were joking. Please, I cannot lose him. He is the best thing that ever happened to me. Just tell him it was a prank. I will do anything. Delete. I did not feel a pang of sympathy. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a contract manager who had finally enforced the termination clause. For years, I had been the safety net. I had been the one who fixed the speeding tickets and paid the late fees. By refusing to fix this, I was not being cruel. I was simply letting gravity do its job. I got up and walked to the kitchen to make coffee. As the machine hissed, there was a knock at my door. I froze. I had not given my address to my parents. They knew I lived in Brookmere Row, but they did not know the unit number. I crept to the peephole. It was Aunt Judith. I opened the door. Judith stood there in a trench coat, holding 2 large coffees from a local bakery and a bag of bagels. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright. May I come in? She asked. I escaped the asylum. I stepped back to let her in. How did you find me? I am a lawyer. Eloise, she said, setting the coffees on my small quartz island. I know how to look up public records. Plus, you mentioned the development name yesterday. She took off her coat and looked around my living room. It was sparse, a gray sofa, a bookshelf filled with legal thrillers, a single abstract painting on the wall. It is small, she said. It is mine, I replied. It is perfect, she corrected. We sat at the island, drinking the coffee in silence for a long time. It was not an awkward silence. It was the companionable silence of 2 soldiers who had survived the same battle. How is it over there? I asked eventually. Apocalyptic. Judith said, Gavin left about 20 minutes after you did. He took his parents. He looked like a man who had been hit by a bus. Diane cried until midnight. Frank took 2 sleeping pills and went to bed. Blair spent the night scrubbing her social media, deleting comments, and screaming at anyone who tried to talk to her. She is deleting comments? I asked. The internet is fast, Judith said. Apparently, one of her influencer friends posted a video of your little speech. It is getting some traction. Blair is trying to control the narrative, but it is hard to spin a foreclosure notice. Judith put her cup down. She looked at me, her expression softening. Eloise, she said, I want to say something, and I want you to listen. Okay, I am sorry, she said. I blinked. For what? You helped me. I could not have done it without you. For waiting 33 years, she said. Her voice was rough. I watched them do it to you. When you were little, when you were in high school, I saw Frank and Diane turn you into a utility. I saw them feed you to Blair to keep her warm. And I stayed in Chicago because I could not stand to watch it. I should have stepped in sooner. I should have told you that you did not owe them your life. I felt a lump form in my throat. I looked down at my coffee cup. I probably would not have listened. I admitted, I had to get there myself. Well, you are there now, Judith said. And I am proud of you. That was not a tantrum yesterday. Eloise, that was a masterclass in litigation. My phone buzzed again on the counter. It was an email notification. I glanced at the screen. The sender was Gavin Price. The subject line was 2 words. Need clarity. I picked up the phone. Judith watched me. The fiancé? She asked. I nodded. I opened the email. Eloise, it read, I am at a hotel. I cannot go back to that house right now. I need to know the truth. Blair is telling me that you forged the documents. She says you are trying to steal the house from her parents because you are mentally unstable. She says the house fund money is in a savings bond for the kids. Please, I just need to know. Is the house really yours? Is the sale real? I read it twice. I could hear the desperation in his typing. Gavin was not a bad man. He was just a gullible one. He had fallen in love with the image of Blair, the curated Instagram version, and now he was trying to reconcile that image with the woman who had shrieked about entitlements over a turkey dinner. Do not engage emotionally, Judith advised. Reading my face, facts only. I typed my reply. I did not start with Dear Gavin or I am sorry, Gavin. I wrote, please find attached the digital link to the active MLS listing for 124 Oak Creek Lane. Also attached are PDF copies of the deed, the mortgage note, and the bank statements showing the origin of all payments. The property is currently under contract with a closing date set for December 28th. I hesitated. Then I added one more sentence. I cannot speak to the location of the charitable funds. I hit send. 10 minutes later. My phone rang. It was Gavin. I put it on speaker so Judith could hear. Hello, Gavin, I said. It is all real, he said. His voice sounded hollow. I clicked the link. It is on Zillow. It is listed under your name. Yes, I said. She lied. He whispered. She looked me in the eye this morning and told me you were lying. She swore on the babies. He let out a ragged breath. She said the money from the fund was safe. She said the house was hers. If she lied about the house, what else is she lying about? This was the moment. The domestic thriller was pivoting into a detective story. I looked at Judith. She raised an eyebrow. I decided to ask the question that had been gnawing at the back of my mind for weeks. The question that no one in the family dared to ask because the answer was too terrifying. Gavin, I said softly, I want you to think very carefully before you answer this. Okay, he said. Have you ever seen the medical paperwork? I asked. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What? He asked. The pregnancy. I said, the triplets. Have you ever been inside the exam room with her? Have you seen a doctor look at a monitor and say the words, 3 heartbeats? Or have you only seen the screenshots she sends you? Gavin stammered. She goes to the appointments when I'm at work. She says the doctor has weird hours. She showed me the ultrasound picture. It is on the fridge. You can buy personalized ultrasound strip photos on the internet for $15. I said, they will put any name you want on them. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. Eloise, Gavin said, his voice trembling. Are you saying? I am saying that my sister is a person who raises money for an addition on a house she does not own. I said, I am saying that when someone is willing to lie about the roof over their head, you should verify the life inside their body. I have to go, Gavin said abruptly. I have to go. The line went dead. Judith let out a low whistle. You just dropped a nuclear bomb on that boy. He needed to know. I said, if there are 3 babies, he needs to get a lawyer to protect them. If there are not, he needs to get a lawyer to protect himself. The fallout was immediate. By noon, the social media campaign had begun. Blair, realizing she was losing control of Gavin and the house, turned to her only remaining weapon, the public. She did not name me directly. She was too smart for that. She posted a photo of herself crying, a black and white filter applied for maximum tragedy. I never thought my own flesh and blood could be so cruel. The caption read, "To kick a pregnant woman out of her childhood home during the holidays. I am speechless. Evil exists, and sometimes it looks like family. Please pray for us and the triplets. We are being targeted by toxicity. Within an hour, there were 50 comments. Stay strong, Mama. That is horrific. Karma will get her." My phone started pinging with messages from distant cousins and people I had not spoken to in high school. "Is it true? Did you really kick her out?" I did not reply. I did not defend myself. I did not post a counter-statement explaining the mortgage payments or the theft. Instead, I opened a folder on my laptop labeled Litigation Hold. I took screenshots of Blair's post. I took screenshots of the comments that threatened me. I took screenshots of the text messages she had sent me earlier. The ones where she admitted she knew the house was mine. "What are you doing?" Judith asked. "Watching me work. I am building the defense." I said, "If she tries to sue me for anything, or if she tries to claim squatters' rights, I want a record of her acknowledging the lie." I worked for another hour, archiving everything. Then, I opened my email client. I drafted a new message. I added Frank, Diane, and Blair to the recipient list. Subject: Communication Protocol regarding 124 Oak Creek Lane. Effective immediately. I wrote, "I will no longer be accepting phone calls or text messages regarding the transition of the property. All communication must be sent to this email address. This is to ensure there is a written record of all discussions. Do not come to my residence at Brookmere Row if you appear on my property without an invitation. I will contact the police for trespassing. I will not be providing any financial assistance for your relocation. The proceeds from the sale of the house will be retained by the owner to recoup the costs of the mortgage paid over the last 24 months. This is not a debate. This is a notification." I hit send. I turned off my phone. I put it in the drawer of the kitchen island. Coffee is getting cold. Judith said, "I can make more." I said, "I looked out the window of my townhouse. I saw a bird land on the small strip of railing on my balcony. It was a gray, unassuming bird. It sat there for a moment, fluffed its wings, and flew away." My family was currently imploding. My sister was slandering me to the internet. My parents were likely sitting in the ruins of their denial, wondering how the flexible daughter had suddenly become made of steel. But in my kitchen, it was quiet. The only sound was the coffee maker gurgling. It was the most expensive silence I had ever bought, and it was worth every single penny. The silence I had purchased lasted exactly 12 hours. By Saturday morning, the strategy of the Whitman family had shifted from public shaming to historical revisionism. They realized that painting me as a villain for kicking out a pregnant woman was losing traction against the hard facts of the deed and the mortgage. So they decided to attack the very foundation of my standing. They decided to claim that I owed them, not money, but a debt of existence. It started with an email from my mother, Diane. It was not the frantic, typo-ridden plea of the previous day. This one was long, drafted with a cold, manipulative clarity that suggested Blair had been sitting over her shoulder. Dictating the terms, "Eloise," the email began. "We are disappointed that you have chosen to view relationships as transactions. You talk about mortgage payments and closing costs. You list numbers on a spreadsheet as if that is the sum of a life. But you have forgotten the ledger of love. You have forgotten who paid for your piano lessons when you were 7. You have forgotten who drove you to swim practice at 5 in the morning for 6 years. You have forgotten that for 18 years, you lived in our house, ate our food, and used our electricity without paying a cent. We raised you, we invested in you, and now, when the family needs a return on that investment, you declare bankruptcy on your heart. You do not own that house because you are successful. You own it because we gave you the foundation to succeed. That house is your repayment to us. To claim it for yourself is not just greedy, it is theft of our sacrifice." I read the email twice. I sat in my kitchen, holding a mug of tea that had gone cold. It was a masterpiece of guilt. It took every act of parental duty, the basic requirements of raising a child, and converted them into a loan that I was now expected to service with real estate. I was about to archive it when Aunt Judith walked into the room. She had stayed the night on my pull-out couch, turning my living room into a temporary legal command center. She was holding a stack of papers she had printed from her portable printer. Her face was grim. "Do not read that garbage," Judith said, seeing the look on my face. "They are trying to invoice you for your childhood. It is the last refuge of a parent who has nothing else to bargain with." "It works," I admitted, my voice quiet. "I feel ungrateful." "You are not ungrateful," Judith said sharply. "You are solvent. There is a difference. And speaking of solvency, we have a bigger problem than emotional blackmail." She slapped a document onto the quartz counter. "I ran a full credit sweep on you this morning," Judith said. "Just to be safe, I wanted to make sure Blair hadn't tried to open a store card in your name to buy nursery furniture." "Did she?" I asked. "No," Judith said. "It is worse." She pointed to a line item highlighted in neon pink. 2 years ago," Judith said, "around the time Frank had his heart scare, there was a hard inquiry on your credit report from a company called Swift Cash Lending. It is a predatory lender, the kind that gives high-interest personal loans to people with bad credit. Provided they have a guarantor with good credit." I frowned. "I never signed for a loan with them." "I know," Judith said, "but someone did. A loan was opened in the name of Eloise Clark, co-signed by Frank Whitman. The principal amount was $15,000. The stated purpose was home medical modifications." $15,000? I stared at the paper. "Dad's insurance covered the hospital bills. We didn't need modifications. He sleeps in the guest room on the first floor." "Look at the address," Judith said. I looked. The address on the loan was 124 Oak Creek Lane, my house, but the email address associated with the account was not mine. It was Frank and Diane 78. "They took out a loan in my name," I whispered. "To pay for what?" "I pulled the disbursement records," Judith said. "The money didn't go to a contractor. It didn't go to a hospital. It was transferred into the joint checking account you share with your mother. And from there..." She pulled out another sheet. "It was withdrawn in cash over a period of 3 weeks," she said, "in $500 increments, ATM withdrawals, mostly at a casino in Cherokee, North Carolina." I felt the room spin. My father did not gamble. My mother thought bingo was a sin. "Blair," I said. "Blair went on a road trip to the mountains 2 years ago," Judith recalled. "To find herself, after her breakup with that personal trainer. She posted photos of the mountains. She didn't post photos of the slot machines." "They forged my signature," I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It was not just mooching, it was a felony. Mom and Dad let her do it? Or did they do it themselves? "Does it matter?" Judith asked. "They used your identity to fund a gambling trip, and they are currently paying the minimum monthly balance from your joint account so you wouldn't notice. That is why they are always short on the mortgage. They are servicing a debt they stole from you." I looked at the signature on the loan application. It was a shaky, looped scrawl that looked nothing like my precise hand. It looked like Frank's handwriting, forced to mimic mine, my father. The man who sat at the head of the table and said grace. "This is prison time," I said. "If I report this..." "It is fraud," Judith agreed. "Identity theft, wire fraud. But before we pull that trigger, you need to see this." She handed me her phone. "Gavin just texted me. Apparently, he is doing his own audit." I looked at the screen. Gavin had sent a screenshot of a group chat with his college friends. "Guys," Gavin's message read, "I need to be real with you. The house fund we collected for the nursery. Did anyone get a receipt? Or a thank you note from the contractor?" The replies were damning. "No receipt. Man, just a Venmo to Blair's personal account. She said the contractor demanded cash up front for materials. Bro, I sent $300. Is everything okay?" Then, a text from Gavin to Judith. "I checked our joint savings. The money isn't there. She said she moved it to a high-yield account for the babies. I called the bank. The account doesn't exist. He is waking up, I said. He is realizing he is the next Mark, Judith said. And the church is waking up too. Mrs. Gable from the choir called me an hour ago. She wanted to know why Blair was posting about being homeless when the church gave her $2,000 last month for a security deposit on a new family home that she claimed you were kicking her out of, back in October. She has been telling people I was kicking her out for months? I asked. She has been running parallel narratives, Judith explained. To the family, you are the safety net. To the church, you are the villain who is threatening her. So she needs donations to prepare. She has been monetizing your imaginary cruelty. My phone rang. It was Blair. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Then a text popped up. We need to talk. Everyone is here. Mom, Dad, Gavin. We are sitting at the table. We want to settle this. No lawyers. Just family. Please, Zoom call. 10 minutes. I looked at Judith. She wants a settlement conference. She wants to gaslight you in a group setting, Judith corrected. But I think you should take the call. Because I think you have enough ammunition now to end the war. We set up the laptop on my kitchen island. Judith stood just out of frame. A silent witness with a notepad. I accepted the video call request. The screen flickered to life. They were sitting around the dining table at Oak Creek Lane. The remains of the Thanksgiving decorations were still up. My father sat at the head, looking gray and shrunken. My mother was next to him, clutching a tissue. Blair was on the right, wearing a hoodie, her face scrubbed clean of makeup to look vulnerable. Gavin sat next to her, but his chair was pulled a foot away. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the camera with dead, tired eyes. Eloise, my father started. His voice was weak. Thank you for joining. I am listening, I said. I did not say hello. We want to stop this madness, Blair said, taking over immediately. She leaned into the camera. Look, things got heated yesterday. We all said things we didn't mean, but we are family. We cannot let money destroy us. I did not say anything I didn't mean, I said. Fine, Blair said, waving her hand dismissively. You want the house? Fine, take the house, but you cannot sell it out from under us in 30 days. That is illegal. Squatters' rights. We have established residency. You have established tenancy, I corrected, and I have established a notice to quit. The law is on my side. Blair, Judith checked. Blair's eyes narrowed. Okay, then let's talk about a buyout. You want us to leave quietly? Without a scene? Without me going to the press and telling them how you abused financial power over a pregnant woman? Fine, pay us. I stared at the screen. Excuse me? Relocation fee, Blair said. You sell the house for $600,000? You give us, say $50,000 for the move, for the babies, and in exchange, I will stop posting. I will tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. I will clear your name. She was extorting me. She was actually trying to sell me my own reputation. And if I don't, I asked, then I keep posting, Blair said. And I have a lot of followers. I will ruin you. You will lose your job. Who wants to hire a contract manager who evicts triplets? I looked at Gavin. He was staring at Blair as if he were seeing a monster shed its skin. Gavin, I said, do you agree with this? Do you want $50,000 of my money to silence a lie? Gavin opened his mouth, but Blair cut him off. He agrees. We need the money for the nursery. The nursery, I repeated. Is that what we are calling the casino now? The room on the screen went silent. Frank's head snapped up. Diane stopped crying. I know about the Swift cash loan, I said. My voice was very calm. I know about the $15,000 taken out in my name. I know about the forgery, and I know the money was withdrawn at Harrah's Cherokee Casino. That is a lie, Diane stammered. That was for supplements, for Dad. I have the withdrawal records, Mom, I said. Unless Dad is buying his heart medication at a blackjack table, You are lying. I leaned closer to the screen. And I know about the house fund, I continued. I know you collected money from the church for a deposit on a house you claimed I was kicking you out of months ago. I know you collected money from Gavin's friends. That is fraud. Blair, that is wire fraud. That is theft by deception. It was a gift, Blair screamed. They gave it to me. I can spend it how I want. Not if you solicited it for a specific purpose, I said. I spoke to Mrs. Gable. She is very upset. She is talking to the police. Blair's face turned a violent shade of red. You talked to the church? You bitch? You are trying to ruin me. I am trying to prevent you from going to federal prison, I said. Although, at this point, I am not sure why. I looked at my mother. Mom, I said, did you know about the casino withdrawals? Did you know Blair was gambling with money borrowed in my name? Diane looked at Frank. Then she looked at the camera. She crumbled. I had to, she sobbed. She was in trouble. Eloise, she owed people money, bad people. She said they would hurt her. We didn't have the cash. You were the only one with credit. I thought we could win it back. I thought she could turn it around. So you stole my identity, I said, and you hid the mail so I wouldn't find out. I didn't want you to worry, Diane wailed. I didn't want Frank to stress. I was protecting the family. No, I said. You were protecting Blair. You chose her comfort over my safety. You chose to let me unknowingly carry a debt that could have ruined my career, just so she wouldn't have to face the consequences of her own addiction. She is your sister, Frank shouted. Finding his voice, she is sick. You help sick people. You don't investigate them. I am done helping, I said. Here is the deal. The negotiation you asked for. I held up 2 fingers. Option 1. We continue this legally. I file a police report for identity theft regarding the Swift cash loan. I file a report for the fraud regarding the church donations. I hand over the bank records to Gavin so he can recover his friend's money. You all go to court. You likely go to jail. Blair was shaking her head. You wouldn't put your own parents in jail. Option 2, I said. You leave the house in 7 days, not 30, 7. You sign a document admitting that the loan was fraudulent, and you assume full responsibility for the debt. You return every cent of the house fund to the donors with an apology letter, and you never, ever ask me for $1 again. 7 days? Diane gasped. But the babies! The stress will kill the babies. I looked at Gavin. He had been silent throughout the entire exchange, watching the confession unfold like a car crash. Gavin, I said, this is the part where you need to speak. Gavin stood up. He walked over to the sideboard where Blair's purse was sitting. He picked it up. Hey, Blair shouted. Give that back. Gavin ignored her. He dug through the bag. He pulled out a wallet, a set of keys, and a small, folded piece of paper. I went to the hospital this morning, Gavin said. His voice was flat, dead. The one you said you go to. Cedar Hollow General. Gavin, stop, Blair whispered. Her face went gray. I asked the receptionist, Gavin said. I told her I was the father. I wanted to pay the bill for the ultrasound. I wanted to surprise you. He looked at the paper in his hand. She told me there was no bill. Gavin said, she told me there is no patient named Blair Whitman in their system. No prenatal records, no OB/GYN visits, nothing. He looked at Blair. So I called the other hospital in the city, Gavin continued. Same thing. Then I called Dr. Evans, the name on the prescription bottle you keep on the nightstand. He threw the bottle on the table. It clattered loudly. It is prenatal vitamins, Blair said, her voice trembling. Every pregnant woman takes them. Dr. Evans is a dermatologist, Gavin said. And I asked him, he prescribed you acne medication 3 months ago. He didn't prescribe prenatal vitamins. You bought those over the counter. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the silence at Thanksgiving. This was the silence of a reality collapsing. Blair, Diane whispered. What is he saying? He is lying, Blair shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair over. He is trying to get out of it. He doesn't want the babies. He is abandoning me. Show us the belly, I said from the screen. Blair froze. Show us, I said. You are 4 months along with triplets. According to your announcement, you should be showing significantly. Lift up the hoodie. Blair. Go to hell, she hissed. Show us, Gavin roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice. He grabbed the hem of her hoodie. No, Blair screamed, slapping his hands away. But in the struggle, the hoodie rode up. There was no bump. There was no distended abdomen of a woman carrying 3 children. There was just a flat, pale stomach, and strapped around her waist, visible for just a split second before she yanked the fabric down, was a small, padded cushion, a foam prop. Gavin stumbled back. He looked like he was going to vomit. It was a play, Gavin whispered. The whole thing, the triplets, the house, the nursery money, it was all just a script. I was going to get pregnant, Blair sobbed, collapsing onto the floor. We were trying. I needed the house first. I needed the money first. I wanted everything to be perfect before we actually did it. I did it for us, Gavin. I did it so we could be secure. She looked at the camera, her eyes wild and pleading. Eloise, please, she begged. I did it for the family. I just wanted us to have the house. If I had the house, I could have the babies. Please, don't ruin this. Just buy the house. I can fix it. I can get pregnant for real next month. Just give me the money. I looked at my sister. I saw the desperation, the delusion, the absolute inability to distinguish between her lies and reality. She had built a stage so elaborate, she had forgotten she was the only actor. The negotiation is over, I said. I looked at Judith. She nodded. You have 24 hours to vacate, I told them. Or I release the police report. I ended the call. The screen went black. I sat in my kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. It was done. The truth wasn't just out. It had detonated. Triplets, Judith muttered, shaking her head. She faked triplets to extort a 4-bedroom house. She almost got away with it, I said. Almost, Judith said. She put a hand on my shoulder. But she forgot one thing. What? She forgot that her sister reads the fine print. The 28th of December was a Tuesday. It was a cold, gray day in North Carolina. The kind of weather that strips the trees bare and leaves the world looking skeletal and honest. I sat in a conference room at the law offices of Henderson and Associates. Across the mahogany table sat a young couple, the Harrisons. They were holding hands. They looked terrified and excited, the way people do when they are about to sign away 30 years of their future for a place to call home. I knew that look. I had worn it myself 2 years ago. The difference was that the Harrisons were signing a mortgage they could afford, for a house they would actually live in. Mr. Henderson slid the stack of documents toward me. Sign here, he said, and here, and initial the bottom of page 14. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive ballpoint. I looked at the paper. Grantor, Eloise Clark, grantee, Michael and Sarah Harrison. I did not hesitate. I did not feel a pang of nostalgic regret. I did not think about the Christmas mornings I had missed or the Thanksgiving dinner that had ended in a police threat. I thought about the numbers. I thought about the $620,000 that would be wired to my account within the hour. I thought about the freedom that money represented. I signed my name. The ink flowed smoothly, black and permanent. Congratulations, Mr. Henderson said. The property is closed. I stood up and shook hands with the new owners. I hope you are very happy there. I told them. It has great bones. Just change the locks. I walked out of the office and into the parking lot. The air bit at my cheeks. It was done. The house on Oak Creek Lane, the stage for Blair's dramas and my parents' enabling, was no longer my burden. It was just an address on a map that I never had to visit again. But the transition was not entirely seamless. Blair, true to her nature, had tried to turn the eviction into a final act of performance art. It had happened 3 days prior. On the deadline I had given them, the 24-hour window had been a mercy, extended slightly to 48 hours to allow Dad to pack his medical equipment. I had hired a moving crew, not as a gift, but as a tactical decision to ensure the house was empty before the closing. Blair had refused to pack. She sat in the middle of the living room on a folding chair, filming herself. She was live streaming to her dwindling follower count, sobbing about being force-removed from her sanctuary. She screamed at the movers. She threatened to sue the driver for touching her heirloom vanity, a piece of furniture bought with my credit card 6 months ago. She tried to chain herself to the banister. It might have worked if she had an audience of sympathetic strangers, but the audience she got was the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's deputy I had hired to oversee the process. "Ma'am," the deputy had said, his voice bored and unimpressed, "you have been served a valid notice. This is private property. If you do not vacate voluntarily, I will have to escort you out for trespassing, and since there is an active investigation regarding charitable fraud linked to your name, I would suggest you do not give me a reason to open a second file today." The mention of the fraud investigation was the pin that popped her balloon. Blair stopped screaming. She looked at the deputy, then at me standing in the driveway with my clipboard. She realized that the camera could not save her because the comments section had turned against her. She walked out. She did not look back. She got into her leased convertible, which was likely next on the repossession list, and drove away. Gavin was not there to see her final exit. Gavin had left the narrative 2 days after the Zoom call. He did not make a scene. He did not write a long breakup letter. He simply sent an email to Blair, copying me and his parents, stating that due to irreconcilable breaches of trust and the fabrication of medical events, the engagement was terminated. He moved back to his parents' house in Raleigh. I heard later that he had changed his number and was seeing a therapist. I did not blame him. He had fallen in love with a mirage. When the mirage evaporated, he was left standing alone in the desert. My parents were a different matter. You cannot divorce your parents, no matter how much you might want to file the paperwork. I met them at the rental property I had located for them. It was a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex called Shady Pines. It was clean. It was safe. It was ground level, so Dad would not have to climb stairs, but it was small, and it smelled faintly of industrial carpet cleaner. Diane stood in the living room, clutching her purse. She looked around at the beige walls and the popcorn ceiling. "It is so compact," she said, her voice trembling. "The kitchen is a galley. How am I supposed to host Easter in a galley kitchen?" "You are not," I said. I put the keys on the counter. "I cannot believe it has come to this," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "After everything we did for you, we are living like college students. You are living within your means," I corrected her. "The pension covers the rent. The Social Security covers the bills. It is sustainable. But the deposit," Frank said, sitting heavily on the sofa. "Eloise, the deposit is $2,000. We do not have that kind of liquid cash right now. Not after, well, you know." He meant the casino. He meant the $15,000 of my money they had funneled into slot machines. I looked at my father. He looked old and defeated. A part of me, the old Eloise, wanted to reach for my checkbook. It was just $2,000. I had just made a fortune on the house sale. I could write the check and make the problem go away. I could buy their smile for 1 more month. I clenched my hands in my pockets. I felt the ghost of the manila envelope against my ribs. "No," I said. Frank blinked. "What?" "I am not paying the deposit," I said. "But we can't move in without it," Diane cried. "Eloise, please, just this last thing, then we will never ask again. You said that about the mortgage." I said, "You said that about the car repairs. You said that about the credit card. The cycle ends today." I pulled a piece of paper from my bag. "This is a list of local charities that assist seniors with housing deposits," I said. "I have also highlighted a few churches that have benevolence funds. You can apply to them. You can fill out the forms. You can explain your financial situation to them." "I am not begging for charity," Frank shouted, his face turning red. "I am a proud man. Then you should have been too proud to steal from your daughter, I said. I placed the list on the counter next to the keys. I will drive Dad to his cardiology appointments. I said, I will help you navigate the insurance paperwork. I will bring dinner once a month. But I will not open my wallet, not for a deposit, not for a medical bill, not for a birthday present. The Bank of Eloise is closed, permanently. I walked out before they could argue. I heard Diane crying as I closed the door, but for the first time in my life, the sound did not trigger a reflex to fix it. It just sounded like noise. The fallout for Blair was less private and far more brutal. When I said the stage demanded an invoice, I meant it literally. The members of the church group who had donated to the house fund did not take kindly to the revelation that their money had funded a baby moon and a designer handbag. Mrs. Gable, the choir leader, was a woman who baked cookies for orphans, but she was also a woman who kept receipts. When Blair failed to return the money within the 7-day window I had mandated, Mrs. May Gable went to the police. Blair avoided jail time only because Dad cashed out the remainder of his life insurance policy, the policy meant for Mom's widowhood, to pay back the donors. It was one last act of enabling, one last sacrifice to the golden child. But it came at a cost. The social shame was absolute. Blair was removed from the church directory. Her influencer friends, sensing the radioactive toxicity of a fraud scandal, unfollowed her en masse. She deleted her social media accounts not because she wanted privacy, but because the comments section had become a tribunal. She moved in with Mom and Dad at Shady Pines. I imagined the three of them in that small, beige apartment, crowded into the galley kitchen, feeding off each other's resentment. It was a prison of their own making. And I was not the warden. I was just a visitor who had stopped visiting. 2 weeks after the closing, Aunt Judith came to my townhouse for a final goodbye before heading back to Chicago. We sat on my balcony, watching the winter sun set over the rooftops. You know, Judith said, lighting a thin cigarette, I was worried you would fold. When Diane started crying about the apartment size, I thought you might crack. I almost did. I admitted, it is hard to rewrite 30 years of programming. It is. Judith agreed, but you did it. She took a drag of smoke and exhaled a long, gray plume. My brother, your father. He was not always like this, Judith said softly. He used to be strong, but he was weak for your mother, and your mother was weak for Blair. Weakness is contagious. Eloise, it spreads like black mold. If you don't cut it out, it rots the beams. She looked at me. Family is not a suicide pact, she said, and it is certainly not a place where you are charged a fee just for the privilege of existing. I nodded. I will remember that. She crushed the cigarette out. Keep the receipts, kid. Always keep the receipts. After she left. I went inside. I sat at my computer. I had one last task to complete. I logged into my email. I drafted a message to Frank, Diane, and Blair. Subject, Final Transition, to the Whitman family. The sale of 124 Oak Creek Lane is finalized. The proceeds have been secured. The accounts associated with the property are closed. Going forward, I am enforcing a strict boundary regarding our contact. I will not respond to requests for financial aid. I will not respond to guilt trips regarding my absence at holidays. I will not engage in discussions about the past. I wish you health. I wish you safety. But I cannot provide those things for you anymore. You must find them for yourselves. Eloise, I hit send. Then, I blocked Blair's email address. I set a filter for my parents' emails to skip my inbox and go to a folder I checked once a week. I picked up my phone. I opened my banking app. I saw the balance. It was a number that represented security. It represented options. I set up a credit freeze on all 3 bureaus. I set up 2-factor authentication on every account. I locked the digital doors of my life so tight that not even a whisper could get in without my permission. I walked over to the bookshelf. There was a framed photo there, taken 10 years ago. It was of me and Blair at a beach. We were smiling. The sun was shining. In the photo, we looked like sisters. We looked like two people who loved each other. For a long time, I had looked at that photo and tried to find the reality of it. I had tried to find the love that was supposed to be there. I picked up the frame. I looked at the smiling faces one last time. I realize now that the smile on Blair's face was the smile of someone who had just convinced me to pay for the vacation, and the smile on my face was the smile of someone who thought that paying was the only way to stay in the picture. I did not throw the photo away. That would be dramatic. That would be emotional. Instead, I simply turned the frame around. I placed it face down on the shelf. It was not an act of hatred. It was an act of accuracy. The sisters in that photo did not exist. One was a predator, and the other was a prey animal who had finally learned to bite back. I walked to the center of my living room. I stood there and listened. I heard the hum of the refrigerator. I heard the distant sound of a car driving by. I heard my own breathing. There was no screaming. There was no demand. There was no one waiting for me to fix their life. I used to think that love was endurance. I used to think that love meant making yourself small so that others could have room to be big. I used to think that being a good daughter meant being a silent victim. I was wrong. Love is not a transaction, and peace is not something you beg for. It is something you build, document by document, boundary by boundary. I took a deep breath. The air in my townhouse was cool and still. It was the most expensive thing I had ever owned, and for the first time in 33 years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Tell me where you are tuning in from, and if you have ever had to set a hard boundary with a family member like I did. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Jane Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear it.